So we see his Sherlock Holmes's laughter, difficulty in expression of pleasure and happiness in a normal way, almost as though he had been laughed at and mocked in childhood. Maybe something he has learned from others doing it to him. His non-readiness to shake hands, avoidance of people, avoidance of closeness, and anger towards authority figures. Very jealously guarding fortress around oneself should not be breached by closeness. It tells us how fearful he was of emotional closeness. Very importantly, the moment they take up a case and he has to think out something very hard, a thought comes to him, should I go to the violin concert? And then he says, no, I have to focus on my work. And this is very symbolic of narcissistic characters who shift between reverie and torture. That deep, hard thinking is seen as torture. Anything to do in the world is seen as torture. And being lost in one's reverie is seen as happiness. So we see this reverie and torture, jumping from one to the other with nothing in between. Two psychological quantum states, reverie and torture. But in his case, he is able to actually enjoy deep hard thinking. So for a moment he goes to torture, but again comes back. And he is able to work out of reverie, do the deep hard thinking. In fact, when he does the deep hard thinking, he is in reverie. There is a background of reverie. And that reverie has to be maintained. And when he has nothing to think, he takes drugs to preserve that state of reverie and not fall into torture. And whenever he has to do something very difficult, for a moment catastrophic thinking comes, he goes to torture, he goes to the state of torture, thinks of going into some other reverie state, mostly violin concerts, but again comes back, he is able to re-establish the reverie state. The superego is very strong but flexible, which is a good part. And he has no problems for breaking law in the interest of law. Cannot restrain himself in front of Irena when she is about to get married. There was no need, he could have just walked away. There was no need to continue to be there, knowing fully well what is going on. But he sees to it that the substitute mother figure is getting married to a stable father figure, a stable lawyer. And this is very important from Sherlock Holmes's point of view and Arthur Conan Doyle's point of view, because Arthur Conan Doyle himself never had a stable responsibility shouldering father. His father was alcoholic, mostly spent his time in a mental asylum, psychologically sick, died when he was very young. So this brings out Arthur Conan Doyle's fantasy of having the mother married to a reliable, stable father. Sherlock Holmes almost plays the unconscious clairvoyant. In mysticism and parapsychology, we have clairvoyance. Without any information to see through in a mystical way. And Sherlock Holmes is doing the same clairvoyance at the level of the unconscious. And he often works in the transitional zone of reality and fantasy, where the most unlikely he encounters and tests out, and often it comes out to be true. And he says it in one of the stories, when everything probable is ruled out, the impossible becomes the probable. So what is the psychoanalytic story? Psychoanalytic story is, what does Bohemia mean? Bohemia is the land of Bohemians. Who is a Bohemian? Who does not believe in any law or order. So in the mind, which is that place, which is that land where there is no law and order? It is the unconscious mind. So Bohemia in the unconscious, in psychoanalytic terms, Bohemia stands for the unconscious mind where there is no law and order. And Bohemians are those who eat, drink and be merry on desire, on impulse, without any ethics or law. And these Bohemians obviously live in Bohemia, and the Bohemia is the unconscious. Who has committed a scandal? The king of Bohemia, the king of the unconscious, has committed a scandal in the past, which means Sherlock Holmes or Arthur Conan Doyle has committed a, in the story, if we take the story as an independent text, the king represents the child part of the Sherlock Holmes, or child part of, let me say, Arthur Conan Doyle. The child part of Arthur Conan Doyle has committed a scandal in Bohemia in the past, and obviously that scandal is a Oedipal scandal. So if we look at it from psychoanalytic point of view and put psychoanalysis on unconscious mind of Arthur Conan Doyle, what does it say? Bohemia is the unconscious of Arthur Conan Doyle. The king is the child Arthur Conan Doyle, the omnipotent child. He has committed a scandal in the past, the Oedipal scandal. There is a proof of that guilt, and the proof is a photograph, a memory, photographic memory which is there. And that will not allow him to marry in the real world. He is entangled in the Oedipus. That memory of the Oedipus, the entanglement in that memory of the Oedipus will not allow him to marry in the real world. The memory has to be found to be free from it, but it is hidden in the unconscious. It's difficult to find. The photograph is difficult to find. The king has tried many times but could not be found. The memory is highly repressed, defended against, kept secretly, where the will and the conviction finds it difficult to reach. All the attempts have been futile till the mother herself reveals it to him where it is. So many attempts have been made, all are futile. The photograph could not be accessed. The photograph is the Oedipus complex. The queen, Irina, marries a man of her choice. Holmes participates and accepts it. He is resolving his Oedipus complex. And once it is resolved, he is able to solve the problem. Only when the light of insight is lit by the omnipotent father, the spell of the mother will weaken. The consuming mother of fusion will turn to a nourishing mother. She will enable him to find the complex. The acceptance of that lawyer, that omnipotent father, has weakened the spell of the mother. The fusion mother has now turned into a nourishing mother. And she is the one who will enable him to find the photograph. But she is not going to do it on asking, she will have to be tricked into it. It is a defiant mother, not an obedient mother. A mother who has to be tricked into doing things. Probably very alike Sherlock Holmes's own mother. The complex has not been relieved, but the strength of the father has been internalized. And with reality orientation, the complex has been repressed, detoned, and made harmless. The photograph could not be found. Oedipus could not be resolved fully, but partly it has been resolved, it has been made harmless. Almost as though you intellectually know about it, partially you know it effectively, yet much part of it remains in the unconscious, but largely harmless. After the episode, the king is free to marry, and he does. However, in Sherlock Holmes' story, Sherlock Holmes does not marry. But Arthur Conan Doyle did marry. So probably the king is more of Arthur Conan Doyle's representation. Now so this is what we look at in a general psychoanalytic story. Now let us look at it from Freudian point of view. What are the issues we see from Freudian point of view? Oral issues of omnipotence and narcissism in Sherlock Holmes. Anal issues of inferiority to which reaction formation is used to create superiority and narcissism. There is rage, partly thrown out on criminals, partly turned against oneself, partly turned against one's parents. Very resourceful creativity of the anal phase. Fixated on the mother, Sherlock Holmes is already married. He can't marry anybody else. He's busy being like the father, rather the ideal father. Ideal father who would have caught the mother and set her straight and done justice to her, which probably the real father did not. On the whole, Sherlock Holmes comes out as a phallic personality with secondary anal structure. Essentially a phallic anal personality, largely phallic, with a very strong anality, attention to detail. The Jungian analysis. We see all the archetypal figures here: the king, the seductress Irina, the young wise man, the seeker of truth, Sherlock Holmes, the loyal soldier, Dr. Watson, loyal to his captain, the program of life. The king is in chains of the seductress. The ego has to emerge out of the oceanic oneness for its own individuation from the chains of the seductress. The king consults the wise young man. Right? So he is almost like a young version of the old wise man, the seeker of truth. The king finds his truth, sets him free to create and rule and do good to the world. Kleinian take on it. The king is the omnipotent self-representation of Arthur Conan Doyle himself. And here we look at the Kleinian method, there are many Kleinian methods. One method is look at all the characters as parts of the creator, author, scriptwriter, or director. So here we take it to be Arthur Conan Doyle. So all the parts are parts of Arthur Conan Doyle himself. So the king represents the omnipotent child of Arthur Conan Doyle. Sherlock Holmes represents the professor that Arthur Conan Doyle once had. And this we have to find from his autobiography. The professor represented to Arthur Conan Doyle an ideal father, and on that basis he had created the character of Sherlock Holmes. Dr. Watson represents a friend Arthur Conan Doyle had, but he had to separate from him, and it seems he could never get over that separation. Irina would represent the fickle mother, unreliable mother. The lawyer as the good father, the stable, reliable good father, or a person who had come as a paying guest and who was good to Arthur Conan Doyle in his childhood. The stable, reliable good person. Mrs. Hudson as a stable, reliable good mother, and Professor Moriarty as the bad father. So all the characters, they represent certain psychologically important people and parts of the author himself. From a cohesion point of view, if you write down the cohesion concepts on the left side, the main characters on the right side, and if you say which cohesion phenomena occurred in a healthy way, normal way, or pathological way, H, N, and P. In early childhood of these characters, we can have a cohesion table as is given on the screen. If you talk of mirroring, in case of Sherlock Holmes, it was this phase of childhood was pathological, very unhealthy the way it went, and therefore he became a narcissist. One of the reasons of narcissism. Dr. Watson, same thing, but he took the other route of dependence. Irina, it was very healthy, so healthy that she is confident, alive, and going out into the world very positive. Mrs. Hudson, it was normal. She has reconciled with her circumstances and life, not trying to do anything extraordinary or adventurous. Idealization, it went in a pathological way, but not pathological way. I would say it is both. It's a mixture of pathological and very healthy. So you have here in Sherlock Holmes, from the father perhaps, a very healthy idealization. Therefore, he is on the side of police and not on the side of crime. A very strong superego. At the same time, he saw something pathological, so he suspects everything, keeps observing everything. So in him, the healthy part is much stronger than the pathological part, but he has seen both. In Dr. Watson, a very healthy idealization. In Irina, pathological. She does not mind breaking any law. In subsequent episodes, she breaks laws. Mrs. Hudson, very high. And similarly, we can look at all other parts. Empathy, arc of tension, self-object experiences. This is where everyone has except for Mrs. Hudson, all the three have pathological experiences. Nobody has been satisfied in childhood. And therefore, they are all in lookout, either as narcissists or dependents for self-object experiences. Twinship, both for Dr. Watson and Sherlock Holmes, it has not happened well, and therefore they are seeking it out in each other. Irina, it was healthy. Hudson, it was healthy. Transmuting internalization, which can create a healthy self, has not happened in all the three. In Mrs. Hudson, it has happened normally, not in a very healthy way, but okay. But in Sherlock Holmes, Watson, and Irina, the healthy self creation has not been there. Sherlock and Watson are on the side of law. Irina, at times in some episodes, is not on the side of law, but in different ways. All the three have had creation of unhealthy selves. Sherlock Holmes, the most unhealthy self from a cohesion standpoint. Watson, slightly more healthy. Irina, healthier than the two. This is how we can look at it from a cohesion point of the three characters. Coming to Arthur Conan Doyle, so we can round off our analysis because he is the person who created the whole series. You can find biography and details on www.arthurconandoyle.com. So let us see the factual part of the author and then again look at film analysis. Arthur Conan Doyle, born in 1859, lived 71 years till 1930. He wrote Sherlock Holmes, a few fantasy books and science fiction stories. Apart from Sherlock Holmes, he created a character, Professor Challenger, who are more like a science fiction, and Mary Celeste, more on the parapsychological side. His father was an alcoholic with psychological troubles, lived in a psychiatric asylum and died there. And across his childhood, he was supported by wealthy uncles. We don't know, but in all probability, the mother may not have been very good. He was trained as a doctor. He joined his friend in medical practice, but the two could not get along. So he came to London with actually 10 pounds, which are 900 pounds to buy today's calculations. Some people say 1900. Practice was not successful, so he started writing stories. Tried to got himself trained as ophthalmologist, could not get a single patient, he quit. First story of Sherlock Holmes was The Study in the Scarlet. Then he modeled the character on university teacher Joseph Bell. Doyle's own attitude towards his famous creation was ambivalent. At times he wrote to his mother saying, "I think of slaying Sherlock Holmes and winding him up for good." And his mother responded, "You won't, you can't, you must not." In order to not write stories, he raised his price, but the publishers still paid large sums to have stories of Sherlock Holmes. He created a character of Professor Moriarty around 1893. And in the story Final Problem, Sherlock Holmes dies, but then public outcry made him revive the series with the return of Sherlock Holmes. And in Return of Sherlock Holmes, the first story was The Adventure of the Empty House. And some of the stories of Sherlock Holmes were written as novels and some as short stories. Ultimately, Holmes was featured in 56 short stories and 4 novels. And this is the person we are talking about. So we can see here how the childhood events of the author influence the way characters are created. Not only childhood events, but life events of the author influence the way characters are created, the way events happen. And small events, nuances, they betray something from the unconscious mind. And we can see how psychoanalysis can be used to understand or do film analysis using the film as an independent text, and also to go into the mind of the creator, in this case the author, Arthur Conan Doyle. You can see here how Arthur Conan Doyle's parts, desires, fantasies, fears, psychoanalytic phenomena happening in his unconscious mind in childhood and as an adult, his own life's desires and frustrations, his own life's losses and unmourned pain, as well as desires, they all get up into his work of art. And there is no way any work of art can be independent of the unconscious mind of the creator. So with this, we open up for questions. So any work of art, painting, music, writing, will always betray the unconscious mind of the creator. There is no way you can switch off your unconscious mind and do that work. So when the whole mind is involved, the conscious and unconscious, both the parts are involved. And when we are doing creative work, we are asking the ego to recede, the conscious mind to partly give way to the creative part. Because we have to allow the fantasy part of us to come up to really do creative work. And we have to put the logical part on the back burner. You can neither enjoy art nor create art by being completely in the logical mind. If you go to see a movie and you start saying that this person is doing X because he has been paid to do X, I know in real life what he is. If you start that kind of thinking, you cannot enjoy any movie. So we have to suspend our reason and allow identification, unconscious processes, and memory and creativity to take us over to really enjoy art or to create any art. So we don't want disintegration of the ego. We want ego to recede, right, and direct the fantasy process, the creative process. Winnicott talks very well about disorganizing and unorganizing of the ego. So we are talking about creative unorganizing of the ego, which means the ego is intact, strong in the background, directing and allowing the creative process to go on in a free way. And this is what happens in any form of art. The unconscious mind, life experiences, desires, frustrations, concerns, opinions of the person who is creating something, they always inform that which is created. So from any entity of creation in the artistic or literary area, anything in the social science or humanities area, from the creation, we can always go back to the unconscious of the creator in partial or substantial way. There is nothing like a unconscious proof creation. So it's getting near to time. So should we stop for the day?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
It's
stop
okay.
for the day.
Thank